In the quiet heart of a desolate lab, a scientist named Dr. Alistair Werner spent years obsessing over a single, haunting goal: to bring the dead back to life. His reasons were personal, a family tragedy that left him hollow, an ache that could never be soothed. But his ambition twisted beyond grief and grew into a monstrous experiment that pushed the boundaries of life and death. Drive. Werner's studies led him to a forgotten technique whispered in the margins of ancient manuscripts, a dark alchemy that could bind remnants of a departed soul to a form of energy. And so, on the stormiest of nights, he tried it, binding the essence of a long-deceased soul to a conduit of his own design. The apparatus hummed and sparked, filling the room with a sickly blue glow, the air thickening with something unworldly. At first, there was silence. Then, a faint whisper, like wind through dry leaves. It grew louder, echoing from every corner of the lab, until Dr. Werner realized the voice was not coming from outside, it was resonating in his mind. He shivered, the air around him suddenly glacial, as a figure began to materialize. Translucent and draped in shadows, the ghost took shape, a woman with eyes like to hollow voids, yet somehow filled with pain. She floated above the ground, her form wavering like mist, and the emptiness of her gaze locked onto Dr. Werner. He stepped back, realizing too late what he had done. "You called me back," she whispered, her voice both sad and filled with venom. "But I am not who you wanted." Desperation twisted Dr. Werner's face. "I sought to restore life, not this." The ghost's form pulsed, growing darker, more distorted. She leaned forward, her lips barely moving, yet her words poured into his mind like venom. "You disturbed the realm of the dead. You wanted to bring someone back, yet here I am, bound to this world, longing for release. And now, Doctor," she hissed, "you will help me find peace, or I will show you what lies beyond the veil." Before he could scream, the lights dimmed, and the room was shrouded in oppressive darkness. Whispers filled the air, voices from realms he dared not imagine. The ghost tightened her grip on his mind, pulling him into her memories, a terrifying void of agony and betrayal. And somewhere within his own head, Dr. Werner's voice joined the whispers, as if his mind was unraveling, piece by fragile piece. He now existed in a nightmarish limbo, neither fully alive nor dead, cursed by the creation of his own making. Some say the lab was abandoned, left in ruin, with Dr. Werner's journal left open on his desk, the last entry a single, trembling line, asterisk, "Beware the voices that come from beyond. They are never who you think they are." Asterisk, and in the deepest shadows of the lab, something still lingers. A faint whisper echoing through the halls, growing louder each night, as though awaiting the next curious soul to venture to close. Years passed, and Dr. Werner's lab fell into decay, overgrown by vines and hidden in the wilds, spoken of only in haunted whispers by the few locals who dared remember him. But the place became an irresistible mystery for anyone with a taste for the macabre. Ghost hunters, occultists, and curious students would dare each other to step inside, hoping to catch a glimpse of the fabled specter that haunted those forsaken halls. They found nothing at first, only silence, the kind that weighs heavy on the soul, as if the air itself held its breath. Then one night, a young researcher, Emile, heard a strange hum while cataloging relics from the lab. The lights flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to creep closer as he worked. He froze, his eyes catching a flash of something, a shifting in the dark. A figure formed before him, a woman, or something close to it, her face obscured. Eyes like dark wells, radiating sorrow and something else. A rage simmering just beneath. "Emile." Her voice echoed, hollow yet intimate, like a secret being shared. He shivered. She had spoken his name. "Who are you?" he stammered, stumbling backward as the entity drew nearer, her gaze never faltering. "You came searching for answers, didn't you?" she replied, her voice thin but cutting through the silence like a blade. "So did he? The one who called me here. But he forgot his promise, left me here, bound in this cage between life and death." Emile glanced around, heart pounding. "Drive. Werner. You mean he left you trapped. He abandoned me. And so I wait," she murmured, eyes gleaming with a hint of malice, "for someone who can release me, or pay the price of his deceit. But how can I help?" He whispered, feeling an eerie pull, as though something invisible was tugging him toward her. "You cannot help. You can only learn," she said, her face suddenly twisted with an agonized smile. And then, in a rush of cold wind, the figure surged forward, filling Emil's mind with visions of Werner's failed experiments, his frenzied journals, and a final passage written in his own blood. Asterisk, the bond is broken only by life willingly given. Asterisk, Emil jolted awake, gasping, but found himself not in his own bed but standing outside the lab once more, dawn breaking over the ruins. His heart hammered as he stumbled backward, realizing he'd lost hours of memory. The next morning, when he tried to leave the town, his car wouldn't start. He took a bus only for it to break down halfway, and finally tried on foot, but found himself turning back as though compelled. For each step away, the ghostly woman's voice grew louder in his head, a whisper curling around his mind, promising knowledge beyond comprehension or a fate beyond death. Emil felt himself drawn back toward the lab, knowing that each night she would return, relentless in her pursuit. And the deeper he delved into Werner's work, the more he understood the chilling truth. He wasn't the first, and he wouldn't be the last. As the nights wore on, Emil's obsession with the lab grew. Sleep became elusive, and his dreams twisted with fragments of memories that weren't his own glimpses of a life, filled with regret and sacrifice, a life that felt both foreign and all too familiar. Each night, the woman would appear in the lab, her face shrouded in shadow, her voice now a part of his mind, a constant whisper pressing him to continue where he left off. Emil couldn't resist. He began sifting through Dr. Werner's notes, finding half-finished diagrams, strange sigils, and cryptic equations sprawled across countless yellowing pages. One night, he discovered a hidden compartment in Werner's desk, and inside lay a small, ancient vial filled with a dark, viscous liquid, and a single line scrawled on parchment beneath it. Asterisk, the key to opening the gate lies in this. Asterisk, driven by a force he could no longer deny. Emil took the vial back to his temporary lodging, locking himself in his room. He held it up to the light, watching the strange liquid swirl, almost as if it were alive. Against all reason, he heard himself whisper, What are you?" The woman's voice answered, chilling yet calm. "This is a remnant of a soul harvested and bound. One drop will tether you to me, the other will set you free. But how?" he whispered, shaking, his fingers hovering over the vial's seal. "Drive." Werner never had the courage to finish what he started, she replied. He feared what lies beyond. "But you, Emil, you have the heart to see it through." Her voice lingered, winding through his thoughts. "Together, we can break the chains of this world." In his desperation to understand, Emil took a drop of the liquid, pressing it to his tongue. The world shuddered around him. Shadows stretched and warped, and suddenly he could see her standing by his side. No longer an ethereal wisp but a solid figure, her pale skin and hollow eyes filled with longing. "Take my hand, and we will unravel Werner's prison," she urged, her grip icy and firm. "But be warned, each step will bring you closer to the other side, a place where memories become reality." Compelled, Emil followed her back to the lab, where the air crackled with dark energy, the remnants of failed rituals and half-spoken spells. In the center of the room, she showed him an old ritual circle, etched into the floor, each symbol pulsing with an unnatural light as if they were alive. She placed her hand on his, guiding him to draw his own blood across the symbols. As the ritual began, the room darkened, and the air grew thick with a suffocating pressure. Visions swirled before him, faces of the dead, twisted and contorted, reaching out as if to pull him in. He felt their rage, their pain, their despair. And through it all, the woman stood by his side, whispering his name in a voice that no longer sounded quite human. And then, from the darkness, a figure appeared, its shape indistinct but exuding a terrifying presence. Emil froze, realizing he was gazing at Dr. Werner's ghost, bound to the lab as the woman had been. But there was something wrong. His face was twisted, his eyes hollow, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. The woman smiled, a sinister gleam in her eyes. "You will take his place, Emil." Someone must stay behind to keep the ritual alive. Only then will I be free. Emil tried to pull back, but the darkness held him fast. A crushing weight that wrapped around his body like chains. He looked to the woman, but she was already fading, her form dissipating like mist. With his last breath, he screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the shadows, leaving the lab silent once more. And so, a new figure haunted the ruins, bound to the lab, his voice an eternal whisper echoing through the darkened halls, warning any who dared to enter. And somewhere in the world, a woman, once a ghost, walked freely under the light, leaving no trace of the man who'd taken her place. Yet rumors of strange lights and whispers in the old lab continue, and sometimes, on cold nights, locals claim they see a shadowy figure at the lab's window, watching, waiting, for the next soul curious enough to set foot inside. Emil struggled against the darkness, his vision blurring, as the chains of Werner's ritual threatened to bind him to the lab forever. But somewhere deep within, he found a spark of clarity, a reminder of why he had come here in the first place. He wanted answers, yes, but he also wanted peace, for himself and for those lost souls tethered to this place. Summoning every ounce of strength, Emil focused on the fading figure of the woman, her outline flickering as she stepped closer to freedom. "Wait," he shouted, his voice strained but resolute. "You don't have to do this. We can both be free." The woman paused, her hollow eyes shifting. Her expression softened with a brief glimmer of humanity, of the person she'd once been. For the first time, she looked uncertain. "Both of us," she echoed, a tremor in her voice, as if the thought had never occurred to her. "I've been trapped in this place so long. I've forgotten what freedom feels like." "Then let's find it together," Emil said. "We can break this curse without another sacrifice." The room fell still, the oppressive weight of the darkness lifting as Emil's words filled the air. The chains around his limbs loosened, and he felt his feet touch solid ground. He extended his hand to her, his heart racing with hope and a strange sense of calm. The woman hesitated, her form flickering as though caught between the realms of life and death. But slowly, she reached out, placing her cold hand in his. At that moment, a surge of energy pulsed through the lab, a warmth Emil hadn't felt since he first entered the cursed building. The symbols etched into the floor glowed softly, not with darkness but with a gentle light. The faces of the restless souls faded, their tortured expressions easing into peace. Drive. Werner's ghost, too, softened, his anguished form dissolving into a calm silhouette, his eyes meeting Emil's in silent gratitude before fading into the light. Emil felt the darkness lifting, replaced by a warmth that wrapped around him and the woman. Her face softened, her once hollow eyes filling with relief and gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt whole, her spirit finally freed from the binds of sorrow and resentment. As the light enveloped them both, Emil found himself standing outside the lab, the morning sun casting a soft glow over the ruins. Beside him, the woman appeared, her form now radiant and at peace. She looked at Emil, her face serene, her voice no longer a whisper but strong and clear. "Thank you," she said, smiling, her expression full of warmth. "You've given me the peace I longed for." Before Emil could reply, her form shimmered in the sunlight and then vanished, leaving only a sense of calm in the air. Emil took a deep breath, feeling a profound peace settle within him. The lab was silent now, its shadows dispersed, its tormented souls finally at rest. He turned and walked away, knowing he had not only uncovered the truth of Dr. Werner's experiments but had also found a way to bring an end to the curse. And in the quiet that followed, the lab stood empty, no longer haunted, its dark past finally laid to rest. Emil moved on, carrying with him a renewed sense of purpose, grateful for the chance he'd had to bring light to a place where darkness had reigned for too long.